old Rose and Crown. I think I've had a beer in there in the past. Don't know what it's being turned into now. Hopefully still a pub, but I doubt it. Right, that should be Whittlesey Road over there. Fantastic building on the right here with the flag. I mean, this looks like hundreds and hundreds of years old, but it actually only dates to 1860, I think it is. It was built as a post office, but it looks about 300 or 400 years older than that. Lovely building. Right, Thorney Abbey coming up on the left. Thorney Abbey, as it's known locally, aka the Abbey Church of St Mary and St Botolph. Right, I'm not going to spend too long on the Abbey. I know it's kind of, well, it just sounds grand. I always used to wonder where the Abbey was in Thorney, because I just thought this was a church. And it is. It's not really an abbey. It sits on the site of where the Abbey was. The Abbey was actually a Benedictine monastery stroke abbey. If you've watched the Sawtry video, volume 1, the origins of Sawtry and the Sawtry Abbey, I'm pretty sure this abbey looked pretty similar to that one as well, with a lot of buildings, not just the abbey itself, but it lived a very checkered life. I mean, the Vikings knocked it down. They had big problems with floods because Thorney was surrounded with water. They had the bubonic plague, caused all sorts of problems here. And if that wasn't enough, you then had Henry VIII and his dissolution of the monarchies gave it a good kicking as well. And it wasn't really until mid 1630s, I think, or late 1630s that they built this from what was left. And really there is hardly anything that is left from the earlier days. I don't think there's anything left from the monastery itself, but there's some bits left from the earlier church that was built out of the monastery. But this is nearly all 1638, I think it was. Might be wrong with that one, but it's in the 1630s anyway. When they knocked down the aisles that were on the side of it, narrowed it down to what it is today. It's still pretty big, and it's survived ever since as the parish church really, but it's known as Thorney Abbey, so I don't want to discredit it, but it's more a church than an abbey to me, and not a particularly pretty one either. It's a bit of a mess in places, but yeah, of historical interest. I think the part of most historical interest is down the side here. You see in effect 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pillars at the bottom here. These used to be pillars that allowed people to walk into the aisles. So you'd have the pillars, people would walk through the gaps between those pillars into the aisles, which would be right in front of me now. In fact, I'll probably still be in the aisle now. And they'd have these aisles on either side of the church. And if those aisles were still standing, this church would be twice the width that it currently is. It probably would look more like an abbey, but for whatever reason in 1638 they demolished the 2 aisles on either side, which would have just left those pillars with a big hole between the 2 of them. So they filled them in. Not very subtly either, but they filled them in, bricked them in, stoned them in, and stuck a window in each one. But this used to be inside, this side of the church today used to be inside of the earlier church. Not quite sure why they knocked the aisles down, perhaps we're in a bad state of disrepair. But yeah, that's Thorney Abbey. As I say, I'm not going to hang around too long. because it's a long walk today, and I will come back one day and do a proper Thorney history video, because believe me, wherever you look here there are fantastic old buildings everywhere, but it's going to need a lot of homework to work out what's what and to be able to explain that to the rest of you. I promise I will come back one day. Across the road from the Abbey used to be where Thorney Zoo was. I don't know where the entrance was. It's either here or just a little bit further down the road. Yeah, Thorney Zoo Park, I think it was the 1970s. Didn't last too long, had a bad reputation in terms of animal welfare. But they had a zoo in Thorney, and it was over there, behind these buildings. In fact, I think these buildings were kind of like the admin entry block, call it what you will, of the zoo itself. On the left we have the rather picturesque Abbey Close, aka the Green. I think the house on the left here with the blue door used to be the vicarage to the church. Uh, 1720s, I think, if I recall, that it dates back to. The house next door looks older, but I've got no information on that one. The blue houses. I think the end one here on an old map was the old reading room for the village. I'm pretty sure it's that one. Every village had a reading room. Pop down, read the magazines, newspapers, village journals, whatever. Okay, what's this walk all about then? Well, it is literally a walk from Thorney back to my home in the Ortons. It's about 14 plus miles, so it's a bit of a long trek. Starting here on the Whittlesey Road in Thorney, and I've got to trek down for about 2.5 miles down the Whittlesey Road, which I'm not looking forward to, but it's unavoidable. So I've got to do the Whittlesey Road slog before heading out across the fens, along the river, through Peterborough, on the north side of the river this time, not the south side, so we'll see something different, and then on into the Nene Park and back to the Ortons. I'll stick a map up for those that like to see what the route looks like. Hope you can make sense of this. So yeah, bit of a slog, and I've got to get this Whittlesey Road bit done first, so I won't bore you with too much footage of walking along Whittlesey Road. It has no pavement or anything, so it's going to be a bit treacherous. There's a couple of places to see on the way down, but otherwise it's just a case of get this section done and then get out into the fens, as it were. So I'm going to crack on, make the most of the pavement while we've got one. I mentioned a couple of places of interest along the way. Well, the biggest one is just coming up on this bend. It's more a curiosity than an interest, really. There's a little pool here called Ashley Pool, and I can't really track back to find out what it was. It looks a little bit like an old medieval fish pond, but we're kind of off the Abbey grounds now, but maybe the Abbey grounds stretch further back in the past. It's behind this hedgerow, so I'm hoping I can get round the back to get a view of it. Not easy to see. Go through these stinging nettles, might get a view and a sting. Ashley Pool. Might get a better view further along. Yeah, a nice little pool. I don't know whether it's natural. If it is natural, I'm not quite sure where the source comes from. But it was a curiosity for me because it shows up on maps going back 200 years or more. And it's also known as the medicine pool, and I cannot find out why it's known as the medicine pool. I did ask people at the Thorney Museum, and they suggested that I don't know, 100 years plus ago, probably even further, that local sort of chemist types, druggists as they were called back then, used to come to this pool in order to get their water supplies, basically to make their medicines, and that's why it's called medicine pool. I don't know if that's right, but that's what I was told as a possibility. I can't take my eyes off these blackberries, actually. I quite fancy got to be done. Yeah, nice. The other curiosity on this road is next door to Ashley Pool, and I think the people at the museum said it's gone, it's been demolished. It still appears on Google Street Maps, and I put up a couple of pictures of what I was hoping was going to be here. My interest in this is it's definitely an old wartime Nissen hut style design, even though there was no sort of wartime presence here that I can trace. So I suspect it was moved here from some airfield site or whatever. It was once used as a scout hut, and I really want to have a good look around it. And the lady at the museum said it's gone, it's been demolished. This isn't it. Yeah, it's been demolished. So I'm literally like probably just a few weeks late, and it's actually gone. So I'm a bit gutted by that. It's just behind this tree. I mean, the base here on the approach to where the hut was looks kind of airfieldy. It's that sort of concrete colour. Again, that sort of concrete base, should I say, simplistic base that you used to get on airfields. But I think this was the actual base of the building here. But I can find no evidence that there was any sort of, Second World War military presence on this site. It looks more like it's been moved here, but I don't know. If anyone knows different, please let me know. I'd be very, very interested in what this Nissen hut, if that's what it was, what it was all about. I'll get back on the road now. There you go. I knew there was a sign somewhere. Ashley Pool, Medicine Pond. Very strange. Again, if you know anything about this pool, pond, medicine aspect of it, do let me know. I'd love to hear. You see all the crops growing in these fields. I mean, that's what all the drainage of the fens was about some 300 years ago. This was all swampy fens back then, very wet, water everywhere, and not a lot of use to anybody except the fen folk who made a living off it. Thorney itself was elevated from the sort of wet fenlands by virtue of the fact that underneath what we know as Thorney today is clay with gravels on top, and it was just enough to keep them elevated, and it meant they were an island in effect, with wet fenland and waters surrounding it, just like Ely and I think parts of Whittlesey as well. It was literally known as an island. So where we're walking now on the road towards Whittlesey, I mean, this would have been very wet indeed, and probably we'd be struggling to walk along here. Probably would have been a bit safer, less likely to get run over like I am running a risk of. But there you go. Brown sheep, or dirty sheep. I assume they're brown sheep. Can't say I've seen many of those around these parts, whatever breed they are. Smile. Nice old house, presumably it's a farmhouse. Domestic geese at the farm pond. Look at that soil. Quality topsoil. No wonder things grow well here. And that's all come about from draining the fens, basically. This is what they wanted. Not soggy wet marshland, but soil like this that they could grow things in. And grow things is what they do. It's like walking along a Roman road, this. I'm sure someone will probably tell me it is, but I don't think it is, because it would have gone through the fens. I don't think the Romans were building roads in the fens. They wouldn't have lasted long. Certainly straight. It's one of the many drainage ditches that keep the land dry around here, or dry-ish. I'm trying to work out where the Thorney River was on the map. One of these is marked as the Thorney River, but I'm pretty sure it followed the side of the road, and there's certainly no water in that ditch, so whether Thorney River was a thing of the past, I don't know. At least there's a little trickle of water in this one. There you go, that is the Thorney River. So I called it wrong. The ditch we were just looking at just to the right in the distance there. This is the Thorney River. This is quite a substantial waterway. I did read somewhere that at one point it did supply water to Thorney, presumably drinking water as well. I know it winds its way around the back of Thorney village. Quite a nice little river for fenland. I was trying to work out whether it was navigable or not, because the far bank has got some sort of reinforcing that they sort of usually put on waterways when they want to keep them navigable, but I think you could get up and down it in a canoe, and that's about it. I certainly hope we're coming up to the end of the slog along Whittlesey Road. I think on this bend we head off across the fields. I hope so anyway, because the feet are starting to complain. Banging out these miles on the hard tarmac is one sure way to get blisters, but all is good. Huge shoal of fish in there, can you see them? Are they chub? Look at that. Impressive. I think they're chub. Need a footpath sign, please. Sure it's here. Yep, there it is. To my right. Hallelujah. I almost missed that. Lovely old wartime pillbox in good nick. In good condition. Right, which side of the bank do we walk on? If I get this wrong, it could be a bit messy at the other end. I think it must be this side. Doesn't look like you could do the other side as a ditch, so we'll stick to this one. We're walking along or through Flag Fen. And this one appears on maps going back a long way. Back in the 1500s it was called Flag Fen as well. Fen spelt F-E-N-N-E. Apparently it's named after the landowner of the time in the 1500s, possibly before 1500s, and that was the Prior of Ely. Not quite sure why the Prior of Ely would own lands down here, but he did, and his name lives on in Flag Fen. And I'm hoping we can track across here to a sort of track stroke small road that will take us south, and if it doesn't do that, we're stuck. I was talking about the drainage of the fens earlier, and I certainly don't intend to try and give a history of the drainage of the fens, because there are books on the subject and they go on and on and on. I mean, basically it was just ditches. Landowners built ditches, small ditches ran into bigger ditches ran into even bigger ditches, until eventually they ran into things like a 40-foot drain and the Nene and the Ouse and whatever. So the idea was to sort of build it up, but it sounds easy. Now, if you read up on the subject, you'll see how complex it really was, not least because there were so many different landowners and they didn't exactly work well together. You also had people, fen folks, who didn't want the fens drained, because they made a living out of, I don't know, hunting wildfowl or whatever they did. No, they were not too keen on draining the fens, as it were, but there are all sorts of complications. One of the ones that was interesting that I've never really thought about before was, as they drained the fens, so the land that was being exposed and drying out started to shrink, as it would. It was sort of peaty, and as it dried out it shrunk and the level of the land started to drop. And the problem there was, when the small drains started to meet the bigger drains, in some cases, in fact in many cases, the level of the smaller drain was below the level of the drain it's supposed to flow into, so it kind of didn't work at all. And that's when pumps came on the scene, drainage pumps, the arrival of steam-driven water pumps that actually lifted the water from some of the smaller drains and dumped it into the bigger ones. I think we might see one later on, if it's still around, where the drains that we're following meet the Nene. I know there was a pumping station there. It may well still be there, because I'm sure the problem hasn't gone away. So as I say, we'll hopefully see that. But yeah, it's an intriguing history, very complex, but it worked at the end of the day, because there's crops and fields of crops all around us now. I can't remember whether this waterway is still the Thorney River. I don't think it is. I think I have vague recollections it's actually called Thorney Dyke. I may be wrong. But there are dykes of all shapes and sizes in and around these fields, all broadly speaking trying to flow together at some point, but I think this one was called Thorney Dyke. Cabbage, anyone? I think they're cabbages. I don't eat cabbage, so I wouldn't know, but it looks like a cabbage, or a lot of cabbages. Back in the 1980s, Flag Fen had some gravel pits, PJ Tory, don't know how you pronounce it, in the 1980s if I recall. Dug out quite a lot of gravel from here. Probably got thrown at the developing Peterborough. You see some of the pits in the background. As I say, they finished, 40 years ago now, and like most of these gravel pit sites, they're now filled in, landscaped, very pretty really. Probably looks a darn sight better than it did before they started digging the gravel out. Unusual, given that it's Fenland, that they were digging gravel out, but there must have been a cap of gravel here. I don't really know the geology that well, but yeah, it lasted less than 10 years and then it closed down. It's good for fishing apparently now. Don't know much about it, but I'm told it's very big with fishermen. I would guess carp fishermen. Yeah, definitely a carp fishing lake, I can guarantee that. Bring a tent, sit here for days on end, fish with strange chemical substances, catch big fish. Definitely not my bag. I used to be a fisherman, incidentally, going back to the sort of, well, probably 30 years ago, coarse fisherman. But to me, fishing was small hooks and maggots. You know, I don't get carp fishing. In fact, I don't get the current sort of trend, if you like, of fishing in man-made lakes that have been stocked with fish. It's kind of, I don't know, it's just like going into an aquarium and sitting next to a fish tank and fishing. You know, they're not natural. You know, they've been put in there by man. They're not wild as such. And you know, carp fishermen, they tend to, I mean, you don't fish, back in my day you fish with floating crust or lots of maggots or worms or whatever. Now they use these boilies made out of chemicals or whatever, and I just think, I don't get what it is. Yeah, you catch some big fish, but it's some sort of man-made fish, as it were. You know, it's been bred somewhere and put in there for the purpose of you catching it. Now, I used to fish rivers. Rivers were wild, and yeah, I know they sometimes stock rivers, but it's more of a natural competition between angler and fish, and I think a lot more skillful than fishing in a pond where somebody has rammed it full of fish just for you to catch. That's almost like, as I say, it's like fishing in an aquarium. I never really did get it, but there's a lot of carp anglers out there now who'll be laughing their socks off and hurling abuse, so if they enjoy it, so be it. Not a lot of water in it, but it's a hell of a ditch. You consider all these things are dug out by hand, or they were dug out by hand initially. Whether they're still dug out, I mean, yeah, it's full of rushes at the bottom. I don't like these landscapes. I'm not a big fan of fen landscapes, but I would think for wildlife, birds and whatever, it's probably pretty good actually. Right, we're now, please keep to the public footpath. That's okay. As long as there's signs, I'm quite happy with that. I'm still digging out some stuff there. It looks more like sand and gravel, but certainly digging something out. I've got two Ordnance Survey maps at home. One of them says go left at this point, the other one says go straight on. I prefer to go straight on, but I don't know whether he's rerouted the public footpath to go around his building, his farm. I don't know, see if there's any signs. It's looking like left rather than straight on, but we'll see. I'm sure the ramblers would ignore anything he's done and say, well, I'm going straight on, because that's what's on the map. I wonder if it's this sort of straight on here. I could do it, but I don't think I will. We'll go around. Sorry about the wind. It's getting a bit blustery now. What about that? No, it's straight on. It's a worn path. Let's do it. Yeah, it looks good. It's a lovely house actually that's next to me. If I can just grab a sneaky look. Very nice. There you go, we've made it. See the new power station. Call it new, it's been around a while now. The power station in the distance there, which kind of puts us round the back of Fen Gate, I suppose, or if we were further down the road we would be. Apart from that, I don't really know where we are. We should be heading down slowly towards the Nene in the distance. Apart from the power station on the right, you've got the sort of King's Dyke brickwork chimneys on the left. So the Nene has to be between us and there for sure. I think wherever I walk and whatever direction the wind's in my face, there's something wrong there. Nothing that can't be resolved with an Eccles cake. Lifesaver. Oh, I've been banging along for 30 minutes or so since we last spoke on this roadway on Eccles cake power, which I need because it's blowing a gale. Straight in my face as usual. At least got a little bit of a river to follow, a little bit more pleasant than the road, and we will be turning off here at some point soon, I hope. It's getting a bit boring. What's that construction there? Something of mild interest to break up the landscape. Don't really know what that is. Curiosity got the better of me. Some sort of sluice gate. It is a sluice gate. There's in the distance at the top of the screen there is a drainage ditch, quite full of water actually. Coming this way into this ditch, there's just some means I suppose of controlling controlling the flow, if it ever moves at all. But that's what it is, it's a sluice gate. When I did the Whittlesey walk last week or whenever, I must admit at the end of it I thought, well, my views of east of Peterborough have gone up a couple of notches, but I'm afraid to say they've probably gone back down again after today. It's just so flat and drab and boring, really. There's just so little out here of interest apart from dikes and drainage, and that's it. It's a real struggle, but I've never been down here before. I won't come down here again, but I want to come down here at least once to say I've walked this route. You never know what's going to be around the corner, so we will trek on. In fact, I can already see a building that's got my interest to the right of that tree in the distance. Looks like a Nissen hut, or very similar to a Nissen hut. We'll have a closer look when we get there. You can never tell with these old huts. Certainly architecturally it's the same sort of design as you would see on old wartime sites in the 40s. It could have been built independent of that. I mean, I'm sure you could have them built on your farm and whatever. Could have been moved from a wartime site, or indeed this could have been one, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't. There wasn't anything out here, so make your own mind up. It's certainly got that 1940s feel to it. Most definitely. Certainly in good condition. I've seen these on airfields before, but not in good nick like that. I think we can get off this road up here at this junction, if I can remember how, which would be good news, because I'm fed up of walking on this road. Needs work, a lot of work. Where now, brown cow? What's that over the road? We'll take that. That'll do. Still tarmac, but at least it's a bit quieter and less dangerous and less windy. Sheltered. Whew. I was fearing we'd be hitting another Eccles cake in a moment after that battle through the gale force wind. And stop moaning. Getting closer to the power station now, which with my head-based map solely means we must be pretty close to Flag Fen, which I've never been to. But yeah, we must be close to bumping into Flag Fen, I would have thought, unless I've got it wrong. Impressive bulrushes. I can't get too close, I'll fall in the ditch, but yeah, there's some very impressive bulrushes growing alongside this dike that is absolutely buried somewhere down below all this vegetation. Yeah, bulrushes everywhere. No idea where we are. Could do with some signage. You know what? I think that is Flag Fen. It is Flag Fen. I was right. There you go. Closed Flag Fen Archaeology Park. Iron Age site. Some great excavations were done here, and they've rebuilt some of the or simulated Iron Age huts and whatever. I must make an effort to come in. I'm too mean to pay the £7 or whatever to come in, but I must make the effort. Probably the oldest known settlement in the area, and therefore arguably you could say it's where Peterborough started, but that would be cheating really. So, Flag Fen doesn't really help me in my sense of direction, but we'll keep trekking on. Back in the wind, back on the waters. Hopefully that will be flowing to the Nene and we can just follow it. We must be heading in the right direction, he said, hopefully. I think we are definitely coming up towards the Nene. I'm just trying to keep an eye on this dike, ditch, drain, whatever you want to call it. A bit wary of walking into this, but I suppose you can see it down there. You see how low it is. I mean, what's that, 20-25 foot below where I am. Now the theory was when they cut these drains that this would flow from your left to your right to the Nene. And you can see that bike going along the embankment in the distance. That's the embankment that sits in front of the Nene. So the level of the Nene would have been, and is, God knows, we might know better when we get closer to it, but you know, this drain is about 10 foot below the Nene, I would suggest. So how is this going to flow into the Nene? Answer is via a pumping station, which I think is up ahead. Well, that's the pumping station in the distance there, and it quite literally lifted the water up from this dike. So I was just watching a deer come out right in front of me there. You wouldn't have seen it, but it was there. Anyway, yeah, the pumping station literally lifts the water out of this drain and throws it up into the Nene, which is significantly at a higher level than this ditch is. Now, whether it runs permanently, doesn't look like it, or whether they just kick it into life if there was a need to do it, I don't know. Might see if we get a bit closer. Well, this isn't the Nene. The Nene's to my right, as you'll see in a minute. Pumping station's to the left there. It's called Padham pumping station. Padham pumping station. Let's get a better view from here. So it would have lifted the waters up when the pump is on and it's not on, and the water would have come whizzing through those pipes in front of us and through the ground on the right and into the Nene, where there'll be an outfall. That's how they did it. And I think they only switch it on now in case of emergency. There was a sign on it that said don't switch pumps on except in case of emergency, so it's there just in case. There's no need to move the water at the moment because there's not a lot of water in the drains. There you go, there's the Nene. Behind those gates down there would be the outfall from that pumping station. If it needs to pump it, but you can see it's significantly, at a significantly higher water level than any of the drains on the other side. And they need those pumps to move the water should they need to in an emergency. Right, let's head for the city centre. As you'll know if you watch the Whittlesey video, the old Nene used to head off way over there, across the field those cows are in, over that embankment near that train, and used to head down south and then sort of loop its way back up via, Upwell I think it was, back towards Wisbeach. And they weren't having that in the days when they wanted this to be a more navigable waterway, so they cut a big straight and redirected the Nene pretty much in a straight line from here to Wisbeach, in a very managed section of waterway, no silting up, no real problems with it like you had with the natural Nene. Nowhere near as pretty, but functional is the word. That's the sewage works. I don't know how old. It's a relatively new one after they built on the one that used to be, well, it disappeared under the Frank Perkins Parkway, didn't it? Down by the athletics track, Fen Gate. This is a different one, isn't it? I lose my bearings, to be honest. We are around the back of Fen Gate because the power station's not far away to my right. It's pumping out into the water. I presume it's pumping it out clean. There's plenty of ducks on there now. It don't seem to be having a problem with it all. Seagulls seem quite happy to swim in it as well, rather them than me. Probably 10 out of 10 for ugliness, but it's there. Power station in the background. Certainly no smell, I'll give them that. Anybody who knows trees, they're lovely, these sort of silver green foliage trees that run all the way along this embankment. They must have been man planted at some point for some purpose, but they look quite old. Would be a good windbreak if the wind was coming from a different direction, but there's a whole line of them. They must have been planted, surely. Just disappear into the distance. If you know what they are, stick a comment under the video just for ignorance like me who don't really know trees. I would say silver birch, otherwise it's not a silver birch because there's no silver bark on it, but yeah, I don't know what they are, but they're nice. Right, slogging along the path, long straight path, use up a bit of the time with a bit of waffle. In terms of these walks, I like the idea of jumping on a bus or a train, getting off and then walking home from wherever I ended up, but I think having done Whittlesey and Thorney, especially having done Thorney, I think future ones are probably going to come from the west, because the west is best, countryside wise, chalk and cheese. So I think I'll stick to the concept, try and find some more to do, but coming from the west, or the south or the north, but probably from the west rather than the east. I've given the east a go. There's not really anywhere else out in the east unless I went to did something stupid like walk from March. I don't really want to do that. It would be the same landscape, so I don't want to do that. So we'll be coming in from the west. My next walk is probably going to be nowhere near Peterborough. I have a bucket list challenge to climb Ingleborough in the Yorkshire Dales. I tried it 3 years ago and I failed because the weather closed in and it was too dangerous. We got to the top of Little Ingleborough and then had to abandon. And since then it's really annoyed me and I've got to go back, and I'm hoping to go back next week if the weather is good enough. So I've toyed with whether I should film it, but I think I will, and I'll probably put it on this channel as well, which will upset people, some people, who really think I shouldn't go outside of Peterborough, but okay. It's Peterborough Images does Ingleborough. If you don't want to watch it, don't watch it. If you do, I hope it will be interesting if I do it. And I'm sure some of you have been up Ingleborough anyway, so will find it interesting. So that's my sort of short-term plans. Go and climb Ingleborough and then do some walks coming in from the west. But anyway, heading into the city centre now, very slowly. That's where we've been walking along for the last half an hour, straight and bland. And that's the direction we're heading, straight and blandish. But at least there's some trees at the end, which means we're going to lose this flat landscape, featureless landscape. I suspect we should be coming onto, well, we should be coming onto the embankment as we know it very soon now. I don't even know where that bridge goes, to be honest with you. Never been out here before. It actually goes nowhere because it's closed. Construction site, keep out. What does that mean? Can't say knocking it down. Bit of an eyesore. Right, looks like we're coming down onto what you and I would know as the embankment. There you go. Peterborough Embankment. If you struggled your way through the Whittlesey video, you'll know we visited Black Bridge, which is over there. Obviously we were on the other side of it, or in fact we were underneath it at one point, looking across here to the embankment. Under the Frank Perkins Parkway. Back into the row of trees. I'm actually thinking, I don't know if these were the same trees as we were looking at further back. These just look like willow trees that are not pollarded. But I am ignorant when it comes to trees, but they do look a little bit like willow trees. Just not pollarded willow trees, they've just been left to grow. Maybe that's all they were. Nice though. Very much a part of our embankment. Proper barges to grace any waterway. The Black Duck from March hasn't travelled too far. Looks like a hired boat. Not sure I'd fancy that. There's the old Whitworths Mill over there. Cadge and Coleman Mill if you prefer. It's in a sad state really. I don't know what its future is going to be. It's got some sort of preservation on it, but unless somebody buys it and uses it, preservation or not, it's going to fall down or just be knocked down because it's too dangerous or something. Never did understand how the mill worked. It has that archway with a water flow under it, but it's never a mill driven by a water wheel as far as I'm aware. In fact, I'm absolutely certain it wasn't driven by a water wheel. I think it was a roller mill, probably steam driven roller mill. And the purpose of the water, I have no idea. No idea. Having looked into that archway from directly opposite, it just hits a brick wall. I would guess, having seen it, it's probably where they used to load flour, whatever came from the mill, onto boats, onto barges, who would take it away downriver or upriver. So I think it's just a loading area. Just my guess. In the distance there, you can see the customs house just between the bridge and that green boat thing. Customs house dates to 1700. Or the 1700s, sorry. Used to sit next to a wharf. The wharf was on the other side of the building where the bridge now is, because prior to this bridge, the town bridge was about another 30-40 foot further back than where it is now. Today's bridge actually goes straight over where the wharf was. And anyone travelling up and down the river with their goods would have to stop at the wharf and go into the customs house and pay their dues. Not often you actually see boats moving on the Nene. They always seem to be just moored, like they've always been there. It's not often I see a barge moving in any direction on the Nene. Not quite the boat hire of old, but still boat hire nonetheless, where there's always been boat hire. Take on the swans now, and there's more of them than me. Right, going to have to take on the pond life of Hills Yard to get through the city, unfortunately. Hopefully I'll come out the other side with my gear, but no promises. I made it, just. The 1850 built iron bridge that carried the Great North Railway. Fantastic thing. I think it was 74 years after it was built, 1924. They doubled the number of tracks up above and therefore needed to widen the bridge, which you can't really do with an iron bridge. So they just built another one next door to it. Up there, nowhere near as pretty as this one. The graffiti-laden Great Eastern Railway Bridge. Well, I call it Great Eastern Railway Bridge. It's the loop line that comes down from today's Peterborough station, the former Peterborough North station, and it would loop around and drop you on the Great Eastern Railway, which is what we call, I guess, the what would have been the Nene Valley Railway if it extended east of Peterborough, but this would have took you from Peterborough North to Peterborough East. Still quite busy today. Take a look at these two pictures. These are pictures of the old bathing place before we had swimming baths and whatever and lidos. If you wanted to swim, you came down to the river, and they set aside this bathing place, a few planks of wood sort of divided up, a few wooden bathing huts on the side of the river, and I think on the far bank there used to even be a diving board, which was another plank of wood, I would imagine, nothing special. And I think it was opened in 1872 and I think it closed close to 1960, so it was around for a long time. And several people drowned here, but I'm sure most people had a lot of fun here. The river was a whole lot different then than it is now. It would have been a lot shallower than it is now. And yeah, the Peterborough bathing place. Now I've got to try and find out where it was. I just want to give you an idea of what it looks like. There was nothing surviving. Be nice to pick out the spot where it was. I think I have a rough idea. For what it's worth, which is not a lot, I think it was here. This is about right. Look at an old map. That says nothing to see. Nothing to see. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's here. Right, by popular demand, and the reason I've come along this side is that is the old electricity cut. Right behind me was where the old electricity power station used to be, coal-fired power station should I say, and they used the waters to condense the steam and whatever. And they chucked it out more or less under my feet now, and it travelled up there and into the Nene. The waters were warm and it attracted the fish, and it attracted big fish. Some of the biggest river carp ever caught were caught here in the electricity cut. I'll try and get a view from the other side, at the other end, because I can match that up with a photograph that I've got. But that's the electricity cut, still there really, if they tidied it up and cleaned it up and whatever. It's hard to believe there aren't good fish still in there. That's interesting. We must be on the site of Whittlesey Wharf. I didn't see that last, or did I? I probably did actually, on the Whittlesey Walk when we battled through the bushes to find a little bit left of Orton Staunch. There was obviously a bit more than I thought there was. You couldn't really make it out that side, but from here you can see there's quite a little stretch of it running along there, so we are pretty much where Whittlesey Wharf was. Always a nice walk along this northern side of the Nene between city centre and Orton Staunch. Any time of year, it's always a pleasant walk. Always plenty to see if you're into your nature. I shouldn't have said I never see boats moving on the Nene, because ever since I said that, I think I've seen about 4 in the last 15 minutes. So we hired that one while the kids are off school. Family holiday on a narrowboat. Why not? Right, we should be coming up to the end of the electricity cut now, where it enters the Nene. I think I read it was 450 yards long, the cut, the fishable length. I think the electricity cut dated to around about 1950, when the previous power station was upgraded. It was when the new one was built in, not the current new one, but the new one then, around about 1950. It was when that one was built that I'm pretty sure this cut came to life. And it was decommissioned, I think, in 77, so it's probably about 25, 6, 7 years when this cut was at its best as fishing waters, when it was pumping out warm water. Power station, I think, was demolished in the 80s, but it was decommissioned in 77. See if I can get around there and get a better view. Right, here's the classic picture that I've got of the electricity cut in its heyday, banked with fishermen. I don't think this is exactly the same spot, but we ain't too far off. Here is today's view, all overgrown as you can see, but the cut's still there. It's in better nick than I thought it was going to be. Hard to believe there aren't fish still in there. But yeah, that's the electricity cut 2024. Boat number 6, and some great reggae vibes on that one. I could do that. Just on the edge of the sculpture park next to the rowing lake. This one sits on the side of the Nene and is, I guess, whatever you want it to be. I always think sculptures are, you know, don't have to have an explanation. It's whatever you see in it. For me, it always looks like one of these post-apocalyptic 9/11 style ruins where something went wrong, but I'm sure it's meant to be a ship. It's the way your mind works. Mine's a bit weird. Yeah, it's good. It's good. Some quality artwork there. The base for the under gigs, raves, call them what you like. Very popular at the moment. Great setting for them as well. A bit too old, unfortunately, to get away with turning up, otherwise I would. Right, we're still on the north bank of the Nene, leaving Orton Staunch and travelling up towards Ferry Meadows or Nene Park. We're just crossing an inlet of water here that I'm sure many people cross over and don't actually realise what it is. This actually used to be the Nene. The Nene used to come down here, bear with me, and it used to, we're doing it in reverse here, it would be flowing towards me, but the Nene would flow round there where those trees are in the background and then swing back round onto the river. And it was a meander, it was a savage S-shaped meander that used to be on the river, that in the late 1930s the authorities decided we got to get rid of that meander because it was slowing the flow down, it was silting the river up, it was making it difficult to navigate. So they basically chopped a straight channel, which is what is to our left now. That is today's Nene. That's the channel they dug out to take it straight, and so that meander over there just got cut off and is now just a, I don't know what they call them, oxbow lakes, I don't know what the right phrases are, but it's no longer part of the Nene. And on the other side of the Nene, I think it's over there, I can't really, without going through all this lot, show you in detail. On the other side of the Nene there's another one. I'll put this diagram up because I'll probably just confuse you completely. You can see the bit I've shaded in light blue in the centre. That shows what the course of the river used to be. It was like an S-shaped bend in the river, meander in the river, and as I say, they just cut the piece down the middle and said that's enough of that, and left the meanders on either side of the river abandoned. They're still there. If you do the bird hide walk in Ferry Meadows, you'll walk past the remains of the other side, the meander on the other side. It's like a basin now. It's a deep basin of water, and it just ends there. But it used to flow around to the Nene. So I hope that makes sense. I hope the picture makes sense, even if my waffle doesn't. But yeah, it's a man-made abandoned meander of the Nene. Right, tell that story again. There's the Nene coming down from like Milton Ferry. Pre-1938 I think it was. The Nene used to go down there, and still to a degree does, where those boats are lined up in the distance. It used to go down there and then it used to hook left back towards the current Nene. If you follow it today, it still hooks left, but it doesn't make it back to the Nene because it's blocked off. So they built this cut instead. But it used to hook back to the Nene, oh, I don't know, somewhere beyond that big flashy white yacht in the distance. And it would cross what is now the course of the Nene, across that greeny stuff in the distance before you hit those trees. And then it would snake back again to where we were standing on that bridge, to the current course of the Nene. So it was a big snaky S-curve meander, and they just replaced it with this straight stretch, which made navigation easy, stopped the river from slowing down, stopped it from silting up, etc, etc. Need to watch out now, we're coming down to the golf course and people will be hitting wayward shots in my direction, maybe. Up on the higher ground in the distance and all the way to our right, the sort of higher plateau was the base for an old Roman fortress, a big Roman fortress, belonged to the 9th Roman Legion, thought to date back as early as the 45 AD, so very early on in the Roman conquest. And it's believed they set up here before moving up north and taking over all the lands up there. So it was a very important fortress, and it used to sit up, I think it was a 40-acre site, but it used to sit up on the high ground, which is now under the golf course, or is now the golf course as it were. tranquil River Nene today, looking up towards Milton Ferry. Just entering Ferry Meadows now. Ferry Meadows became Ferry Meadows, I think it was 1978, around that time. Prior to that it was gravel pits, and I remember bunking off school back in 76, I think it was, to come down here with a group of friends, fishing, and we still had big earth movers and huge diggers and lorries trundling past us in clouds of dust while we were sitting there fishing. Must have been one of the ugliest settings to be fishing, but great fishing it was. We used to go pike fishing, and yeah, we had great fun here. But I distinctly remember it when it was still an active gravel pit, but that would have been, as I say, mid-1970s. By 1978 they'd finished digging it out and it was transforming slowly into what we know today as Ferry Meadows. Take away all the trees and the undergrowth, they were like grass banks on either side of this outlet of water back in the mid-70s, and this was our fishing spot on the right hand side in particular. There was half a dozen of us bunking off school fishing for pike, and the bridge I'm standing on now wasn't here. This was an earthen dam, and the big lorries and earth movers had come trundling across here while we were sitting down there getting covered in dust. It was good fishing, really good fishing, and as I say, this was our spot. Now the water flows down here and back into the Nene, but back in the mid-70s it was all dammed off while the lakes filled up, I presume. Certainly can't get down there now. Right, I think I'm going to call it a day now. I'm about 5-10 minutes away from home, so that is it, we're done. And yeah, it was kind of in line with expectations. I didn't think I'd enjoy too much the first half, but I wanted to experience the walking through genuine sort of fen landscape, or what's left of it. So I'm pleased I did it. I won't do it again. But it's what I expected, pretty featureless, pretty bland for me. Not my cup of tea when it comes to countryside, but like I say, I needed to do it and I'm pleased I have. Second half of the walk, that's my sort of patch really, my sort of countryside from sort of town out here to Ferry Meadows, and I enjoyed that and that was good. So I hope somewhere along the way you enjoyed something from the journey, and thank you for joining me and coming along and suffering it and experiencing it in equal parts. And as I say, I'll be out probably next week somewhere way up north climbing mountains, and if I decide to put it on here, which I'm sure I will, you can come along with me and join in there. If not, you can bypass that one, and we'll be doing another walk of this nature, I don't know, if about 3 weeks time, 4 weeks time, and we'll hopefully, if I can plan it, come from the western side and not the eastern side. But again, thank you very much for coming along, and I will see you next time.